My 14-year-old daughter is in a wheelchair. On a warm afternoon, she was sitting in our front yard in her chair, enjoying the sunshine and chatting with me about her day at school. She looked so peaceful and happy, her favorite blanket over her lap. Everything was calm. Then the HOA Karen stormed across the lawn, carrying an open bucket of bright red paint and a furious look on her face. She pointed at my daughter and shouted, "This wheelchair is an eyesore. It's ruining the curb appeal of the whole neighborhood. No disabled stuff allowed in plain view." My daughter looked up, shocked, and quietly said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I live here. I'm just sitting outside for a bit." That made Karen explode with rage. She lifted the paint bucket high and yelled, "Then let's fix that right now." In one vicious motion, she dumped the entire bucket of red paint over my daughter, splashing it across her clothes, her hair, her face, and her wheelchair. My girl gasped in horror, the cold paint dripping into her eyes as she cried out, "It stings. Dad, help! I can't see. Why would you do this?" Karen dropped the empty bucket, crossed her arms, and smirked. "There. Now it matches the HOA color scheme better." She didn't notice the black police SUV pulling into the driveway at that exact second. Out stepped me, the town's police chief, home early from patrol in full uniform. I'd heard my daughter's cries and smelled the fresh paint from the street. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you are watching from, and please hit subscribe for more stories where the good guys always win. Red paint doesn't fall quietly. It doesn't spill in a polite line or fade into the background like a mistake. It explodes. It splashes. It announces itself with violence, even when no one throws a punch. One second, my daughter was laughing. She was sitting in her wheelchair beneath the open sky, the late afternoon sun warming her face, her favorite blanket tucked neatly over her legs. She was telling me about her history class, about how she'd finally understood a lesson that had confused her all week. Her voice was calm, happy, confident, the sound of a kid who felt safe. Everything was normal. Then the smell hit me first. Sharp, chemical, wrong. I turned just as a shadow crossed the grass. An HOA woman, Karen, was storming across our lawn, gripping a plastic bucket so full of bright red paint it sloshed dangerously with every step. Her face was tight with fury, jaw clenched, eyes locked not on me but on my daughter. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask a question. She didn't lower her voice. "That wheelchair is an eyesore," she shouted, pointing like she was accusing garbage. "It's ruining the curb appeal of the neighborhood. Disabled equipment is not allowed in plain view." The words hit before the paint did. My daughter froze. I felt it in her posture, the sudden stillness, the confusion, the instinct to apologize for existing. I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice small. "I live here. I'm just sitting outside." That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Karen's face twisted, as if kindness offended her more than defiance ever could. She stepped closer, boots digging into our lawn, lifted the bucket with both hands and screamed, "Then let's fix that right now." Time didn't stop, but it stretched. I shouted her name. I took a step forward. Gravity won. The bucket tipped. Cold paint cascaded downward, splashing over my daughter's shoulders, her hair, her blanket, her wheelchair. Red streaked across fabric and metal, dripping onto the grass like a warning flare. My daughter gasped, shocked more than hurt, wiping at her eyes as tears came instantly. "Dad, I can't see. It stings. Why would she do that?" Her voice cracked in panic and disbelief. Karen dropped the empty bucket at her feet. It rolled once, hollow and useless. She crossed her arms. "There," she said smugly. "Now it matches the HOA color scheme better." For half a second, the world went silent. Then an engine cut. A black police SUV rolled into the driveway, tires crunching against gravel. The driver's door opened with controlled precision. I stepped out in full uniform. The badge on my chest caught the sunlight. The radio at my shoulder crackled once. The neighborhood, windows, porches, sidewalks, froze. Karen turned, already mid-sentence, ready to argue. Then she saw me. And in that moment, every ounce of authority she thought she had evaporated. I didn't yell. I didn't run. I walked, straight toward my daughter, and dropped to my knees beside her, pulling her gently toward me, shielding her with my body, my jacket, my hands. "You're okay," I said quietly, steady even as my heart thundered. "I've got you." She clung to my sleeve, shaking. Behind us, phones were already out. Neighbors had seen everything. I stood slowly. You just assaulted a child, I said, my voice calm and absolute. My child. Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Red paint can be washed away. What she had just done couldn't, and she was about to learn that some colors never fade, especially when justice sees them clearly. Before the red paint, before the shouting, before the way the neighborhood would never feel the same again, there was only a quiet afternoon. The kind of afternoon you take for granted. The sun sat comfortably in the sky, not too hot, not too low, casting a warm golden light across our front yard. A gentle breeze moved through the trees, rustling the leaves just enough to be soothing. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower hummed, and a dog barked lazily before settling back into silence. My daughter sat in her wheelchair near the center of the yard, angled slightly so she could feel the sun on her face. Her favorite blanket rested across her lap, the edges tucked neatly around her legs the way she liked. She had always been particular about small comforts, things that helped her feel steady and safe in a world that often moved too fast for her. She was smiling, not a big, forced smile, but the relaxed kind that comes when someone feels completely at ease. She was telling me about her day at school, about a presentation she'd been nervous about but ended up doing well on, about a friend who had shared snacks with her at lunch, about how her teacher had complimented her writing. I listened, nodding, asking questions, laughing at the parts she found funny. These moments mattered more than she knew. They were proof that despite everything, doctor visits, accommodations, limitations, she was still just a kid enjoying her life. I like sitting out here, she said, tilting her face toward the sun. It makes me feel normal. That word always hit me harder than she realized. Normal. To her, it meant peace. It meant being outside without being stared at. It meant existing without someone questioning whether she belonged there. I smiled and told her, "You are normal. This is your yard. You can sit here as long as you want." She nodded, satisfied, pulling the blanket a little tighter. For a while, we just sat there. No rush, no tension, just the quiet comfort of being together. I remember thinking how rare moments like that felt, how easily they could be disrupted, how fragile peace could be. I didn't know how right I was. The first sign something was wrong wasn't the shouting. It was the footsteps, fast, heavy, angry. They cut across the grass in a way that didn't belong to the calm afternoon. I looked up just as a shadow crossed the yard, sharp and sudden. A woman was moving toward us with purpose, her shoulders stiff, her jaw clenched. Karen. She was a familiar presence in the neighborhood, always watching, always enforcing, always convinced she knew what was best for everyone else. In her hands was a plastic bucket filled nearly to the brim with bright red paint. It sloshed dangerously with each step threatening to spill. The smell reached me before she spoke, strong, chemical, completely out of place. My daughter noticed it too. She frowned slightly, confused, her body tensing as she sensed the shift in energy. She turned her wheelchair a little, instinctively angling closer to me. Karen stopped a few feet away, glaring down at my daughter like she was looking at a problem that needed correcting. "That wheelchair," she snapped, pointing. "It's an eyesore." The words were sharp, careless, cruel. My daughter flinched. I felt it immediately, the way her shoulders tightened, the way her hands curled slightly against the armrests. "It's ruining the curb appeal of the whole neighborhood," Karen continued, her voice rising. "No disabled stuff allowed in plain view. HOA rules." For a moment, my daughter didn't speak. She looked from Karen to me, searching my face, trying to understand what she'd done wrong. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I live here. I'm just sitting outside for a little while." Her voice was polite, apologetic, the way kids learn to speak when the world has taught them they must explain themselves just to exist. My chest tightened. This was supposed to be a quiet afternoon, a safe moment, a simple memory. Instead, it was becoming something else entirely. Karen's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. Her grip on the bucket tightened, knuckles whitening. She took another step forward, close enough that I could see the anger trembling beneath her forced composure. The sun still shone. The birds still sang. But the peace was already gone. And standing there in our front yard, watching my daughter shrink under the weight of someone else, cruelty, I knew, deep down, that this moment would change everything. The quiet afternoon was over. And what came next would leave a mark no amount of time could erase. Cruelty rarely announces itself as cruelty. It disguises itself as policy, as procedure, as rules. Karen didn't see herself as someone doing something wrong. That was the most dangerous part. She saw herself as justified, empowered, entitled. In her mind, she wasn't attacking a child. She was correcting a violation. That belief was what allowed her to stand there, arms crossed, while my daughter struggled to wipe paint from her eyes with shaking hands. "I can't see," my daughter whispered, panic creeping into her voice. "Dad, it's everywhere." I moved instantly, pulling her gently toward me, shielding her from Karen's line of sight. I grabbed a clean towel from the porch chair and carefully dabbed at her face, careful not to rub, careful not to rush. She trembled, more from shock than anything else, her breathing uneven. Karen rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting," she snapped. "It's just paint. Wash it off. The real problem is that wheelchair being on display like that." That sentence told me everything I needed to know, not what she'd done, not why my daughter was crying, but how completely she had erased my child's humanity. "This isn't about paint," I said, my voice low but controlled. "You crossed onto private property and poured it on a minor." She scoffed. "Don't get dramatic. HOA rules clearly state." "There is no rule," I cut in, standing now, placing myself fully between her and my daughter, "that allows you to touch her. Ever." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You think you're special? Everyone thinks their situation is special. If I let one exception slide, the whole neighborhood falls apart." That was the lie she lived by. That kindness leads to chaos. That accessibility is favoritism. That empathy Aiken's order. Behind us, the neighborhood was waking up. A curtain twitched. A garage door paused halfway down. Someone across the street stepped onto their porch, phone already in hand. The moment had crossed from private cruelty into public accountability. Karen noticed too. Her posture shifted. She straightened, puffed up, adopting the stance she always used when challenged. "I am enforcing standards," she declared loudly, "for the benefit of the growing audience. This neighborhood has rules for a reason." I looked at her, then at the people gathering. "Rules exist to protect people," I said evenly, "not humiliate them, not target children, not erase someone because they make you uncomfortable." My daughter gripped my sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "did I do something wrong?" The question broke something inside me. I knelt beside her immediately, meeting her eyes. "No," I said firmly, "you did nothing wrong. Not a single thing." Karen laughed sharply. "You're teaching her entitlement." "No," I replied, standing again. "I'm teaching her dignity." That was when the black SUV rolled fully into the driveway. The engine cut. The sound was subtle, but final. Karen turned, irritation already on her face, ready to bark at whoever dared interrupt her authority. Her mouth opened. Then she saw the uniform, the badge, the radio, the unmistakable presence of law, not imagined power. Her face drained of color faster than the paint had drained from the bucket. I stepped forward, every move deliberate, every gesture controlled. I wasn't acting as an angry parent now. I was acting as someone trained to take command of a situation when it crossed a line. "You will step back," I said calmly. "Now." Karen took an involuntary step backward. Phones were fully raised now. Someone whispered, "That's the police chief." Another voice murmured, "She poured it on the kid." Karen's confidence collapsed inward. I was just enforcing," she stammered. "You were assaulting a child under the false authority of an HOA," I said. "And you did it in public. With witnesses." Her hands began to shake. I turned briefly to my daughter, checking her again. She nodded, paint smeared but eyes clear, watching everything with a mixture of fear and dawning understanding. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about power. About how easily it can be abused when no one pushes back. Karen had hidden cruelty behind rules for years because it worked. Because people were afraid. Because silence protected her. But cruelty collapses when exposed to light, and standing there in our front yard, neighbors watching, evidence undeniable, authority no longer imaginary. Karen finally understood something she had never considered before. Rules do not give you the right to hurt people, and power does not belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who protect the vulnerable. She lowered her eyes. For the first time, she had no rule to hide behind, and the neighborhood, once silent, was watching closely to see what accountability looked like. Karen had spent years mistaking volume for authority. She believed confidence came from speaking loudly, from pointing fingers, from invoking the rules as if they were sacred law handed down only to her. In her world, no one ever pushed back hard enough to matter. People sighed, complied, whispered later, but they didn't stop her. That illusion shattered the moment she truly saw the badge. Not just the metal pinned to my chest, but everything it represented: accountability, witnesses, consequences. The kind that didn't bend to HOA bylaws or personal grudges. Her eyes flicked from the badge to the radio on my shoulder, then to the SUV behind me. The neighborhood felt suddenly smaller, tighter, like the air itself had shifted. I didn't know," she said quickly, the words tumbling out as if speed might save her. "If I'd known you were, well, I mean, that I'm the police chief?" I finished calmly. She nodded, swallowing hard. "That doesn't change anything," I said. "Not what you did. Not who you did it to." Around us, the quiet had transformed into a low murmur. Neighbors stood openly now, on porches, at the ends of driveways, some with phones raised, others with arms crossed in disbelief. A woman from 3 houses down shook her head slowly. A man whispered something to his wife and pointed at the red paint still dripping from my daughter's wheelchair. Karen noticed all of it. Her shoulders hunched inward, her earlier bra vado dissolving under the weight of attention. "I was enforcing community standards," she insisted, though her voice no longer carried. "That's my responsibility." "No," I replied. "Your responsibility is to stay off private property and keep your hands to yourself, especially when it comes to children." My daughter shifted beside me. I felt her fingers curl around mine, grounding both of us. The paint had stained her clothes, her blanket, parts of her chair, but her eyes were steady now. She was watching, learning. Karen followed my gaze and seemed to realize, perhaps for the first time, that this wasn't just a confrontation between adults. A child was witnessing who stood up and who shrank away when cruelty was exposed. "I didn't hurt her," Karen muttered. "It was just paint." "Intent doesn't erase impact," I said, "and neither does denial." I turned slightly, addressing the growing crowd. "If anyone here recorded what happened, please preserve it. Do not edit it. Do not share it yet." That sentence alone carried weight. A few people nodded immediately. One man said, "I got it all." Another added, from the yelling onward. Karen's face went pale. "This is getting blown out of proportion," she said weakly. "We can handle this internally." "There is no internal when a crime occurs," I answered. "And there is no HOA authority over basic human rights." She took another step back, heels scraping against the concrete. "Are you arresting me?" I studied her for a moment, not with anger, but with clarity. The kind that comes from years of knowing when to escalate and when to let procedure do its work. "I'm documenting," I said, "and I'm calling an on-duty unit to take statements. You will remain here." Her mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time since she'd marched across our lawn, Karen had no script, no rule to cite, no neighbor to intimidate, no illusion of control. A patrol car pulled up moments later, lights off but unmistakable. Officer Ramirez stepped out, taking in the scene, the paint, the witnesses, my daughter, Karen, standing rigid and silent. He looked at me. I gave a slight nod. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, professional and firm, "I'm going to need you to stay right where you are." Karen's chin trembled. "This is harassment," she whispered. "No," Ramirez replied. "This is procedure." As statements began, neighbors spoke up one by one. Not angrily, clearly, calmly, truthfully. Each voice added weight, forming a record that couldn't be dismissed or rewritten. I knelt beside my daughter again, brushing a streak of paint from her cheek. "You okay?" I asked softly. She nodded. "I was scared," she admitted. "But I'm not anymore." I smiled, pride tightening my chest. Good, because she had just seen something important. She had seen that power doesn't come from cruelty, that rules don't outrank people, and that when someone tries to erase you, the right response is not silence, but truth, spoken where everyone can hear it. Karen stood out. One now, no longer the enforcer, just another person facing the consequences of her choices, and the badge she hadn't seen coming? It wasn't there to threaten her. It was there to protect the child she thought no one would defend. The fire department truck hadn't even cleared the corner when Karen finally realized this wasn't ending with a warning. She stood near the curb, arms wrapped tightly around herself, watching as Officer Ramirez finished photographing the scene. The red paint splashed across the grass, the streaks on the wheelchair, the stained blanket folded carefully on the porch. Evidence doesn't care about excuses. It just exists, waiting to be catalogued. I can clean it, Karen said suddenly, her voice sharp with desperation. I'll pay for everything. The chair, the clothes, whatever it costs. This doesn't need to go any further. I turned slowly, meeting her eyes. Some things don't come off with soap, I said. This is one of them. My daughter sat quietly beside me, wrapped now in a spare hoodie one of the neighbors had brought over. She looked small in that moment, but there was a steadiness in her posture I hadn't seen before. Trauma does strange things. It can hollow you out, or it can harden something inside you. Right now, she was holding herself together with quiet resolve. Officer Ramirez cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said to Karen, we're going to need you to come with us to answer a few more questions. Karen's head snapped up. Am I under arrest? Not at this moment, he replied. But this is an active investigation involving property damage, harassment, and endangerment of a minor. The word minor landed like a dropped plate. Around us, the neighborhood had shifted again. This time, there was no murmuring, just open attention. No one looked away. No one pretended not to see. The same people who once avoided conflict were standing firm now, arms folded, jaws tight, bearing witness. Mrs. Caldwell, who lived across the street and had never spoken above a whisper in the years I'd known her, stepped forward. I want it on record, she said, voice shaking but strong, that this isn't the first time she's targeted that family. Or others. Karen spun toward her. That's a lie. It's not, another neighbor said. Then another. Stories came out in fragments at first, threatening notes, fines that made no sense, inspections that only happened to certain houses. A pattern, slowly revealing itself. Officer Ramirez wrote steadily, his pen never stopping. Karen's face flushed red, not with anger this time, but something closer to panic. This is a witch hunt, she snapped. You're all ganging up on me. No, I said quietly. This is accountability catching up. She laughed, a brittle sound. You think this ruins me? I'll still be on the HOA board. I'll still have authority. I shook my head. Not after today. That finally got through. What do you mean? She demanded. I pulled out my phone. Not to threaten, not to grandstand, but to show her what consequences look like in real time. An email had already come in from the city's legal department. Another from the HOA's management company. When something crosses from nuisance into liability, institutions move fast. The HOA doesn't want to be associated with this, I said. Neither does the city, and neither do your insurers. Her mouth opened, then closed again. They'll investigate, I continued. They'll review complaints, and they'll ask why someone with a history of harassment was allowed to carry out enforcement unchecked. Karen took a step back, nearly stumbling off the curb. You're doing this because you're powerful, she hissed. Because you can. I knelt again beside my daughter, lowering my voice. No, I said. I'm doing this because she can't, and because you thought that meant no one would. The patrol car door opened with a soft click. Officer Ramirez gestured politely. Karen hesitated, scanning the faces around her, searching for support that wasn't there. As she got in, she muttered, This neighborhood used to have standards. I didn't respond, because standards aren't about appearances. They're about how you treat the most vulnerable when no one is watching. Later, after the reports were filed and the neighbors drifted home, I helped my daughter inside. We sat at the kitchen table, scrubbing paint from her hands. Some of it came off easily, some of it left faint stains behind. She noticed and frowned. It's still there. I smiled gently. Tea. Hat's okay. It doesn't mean it's dirty. It just means something happened. She nodded slowly, thinking that over. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across a street that suddenly felt different. Quieter, but stronger. A place where silence had finally broken. Karen would go home to questions she couldn't yell her way out of, meetings she couldn't dominate, consequences she couldn't wash away. And my daughter? She went to bed that night knowing something far more important than rules. She knew she was seen, she knew she was protected, and she knew that cruelty, no matter how loudly it shouts, always leaves a record behind. By Monday morning, the neighborhood looked the same. Same trimmed hedges, same identical mailboxes, same quiet hum of routine. But underneath it, everything had changed. Word travels fast in places built on appearances. By the time the school bus stopped at the corner, everyone knew Karen wasn't answering HOA emails. By lunchtime, people knew why. By evening, the board had scheduled an emergency meeting. One that, for the first time in years, wasn't invite only. My daughter noticed the difference before I did. When we rolled out onto the porch that afternoon, she paused, scanning the street. Neighbors waved, not awkwardly, not guiltily, openly. Mrs. Caldwell crossed over with a small potted plant and said, "For your yard, it deserves color." A teenager from 2 houses down offered to help repaint the wheelchair if we wanted. No pity. Just pres. Ents. "They're not looking away," my daughter whispered. "No," I said. "They're finally looking right." The HOA meeting was held in the community center gym, a neutral space, bright and echoing. Folding chairs replaced the usual polished conference table. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Transparency tends to choose larger rooms. Karen didn't attend. Her absence said more than any defense could have. The board chair opened with a formal statement, voice tight, reading from prepared notes about regrettable incidents and ongoing reviews. Then the floor opened, and people stood up, one by one. A veteran who'd been fined for a temporary ramp during recovery. A single mother threatened with liens over chalk drawings. An elderly man cited for visible medical equipment on his own porch. Patterns, spoken aloud, lose their camouflage. When it was my turn, I didn't lead with my title. I didn't need to. "I'm here as a parent," I said, "and as a neighbor. What happened on our lawn wasn't an exception. It was the result of unchecked power dressed up as community standards." My daughter sat beside me, hands folded in her lap. She asked to speak too. The room stilled. "I like being outside," she said, voice clear. "I like sunshine. I like talking to people. My wheelchair isn't a problem. It's how I get places." She looked around the room, meeting eyes, adult eyes, without flinching. "I shouldn't have to disappear to make other people comfortable." Silence followed. Not the heavy kind, the listening kind. By the end of the meeting, votes were cast, interim measures adopted, enforcement suspended pending investigation. A new accessibility committee formed, led by residents who'd never been invited into decision-making before. Change didn't arrive with applause. It arrived with paperwork, with policy, with accountability written down where no one could pretend it didn't exist. That evening, we sat on the front lawn again. The grass still held faint traces of red where paint had splashed and soaked deep. We could have replaced it. Covered it. Pretended it never happened. We didn't. "This part won't grow back right away," my daughter said. "That's okay," I replied. "It'll remind people," she smiled. "Of what? Of what belongs in plain view." She leaned back, letting the sun warm her face. A couple walked by and stopped to chat. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Life resumed. Not unchanged, but corrected. Karen resigned a week later. No speech, no apology. Just a notice, brief and final, and the neighborhood didn't collapse without her. It breathed easier. Our driveway became a gathering place. Kids chalking, parents talking, someone always asking if my daughter wanted company. The wheelchair didn't vanish. The ramp stayed. The blanket came out on cool evenings. Visibility became normal. That was the real consequence. Not fines, not hearings, not even removal from power. The real consequence was that the thing Karen Tree D to erase became the center of the community, and no one questioned it again. Because dignity doesn't need permission. Because access isn't an eyesore. Because the people who were told to hide finally took up space. And once a neighborhood learns what truly belongs, in plain view, it never unsees it.